Lost Bobcat Cub leads rescuers to a hidden cave. What's inside changes everything. In the dense, untouched wilderness of the Silver Pine Ridge, a place few had ever ventured, Ellie Nash was on the hunt. Not for game, not for sport, but for something far more important. A lost bobcat cub had been spotted days earlier, its cries faint but unmistakable, a call for help echoing through the trees. Ellie, a seasoned wildlife rescuer, had seen it all. From injured birds to orphaned deer, she had dedicated her life to saving animals. But this one felt different. The cub was alone, far from any known bobcat den. Ellie's instincts told her that if she didn't find it soon, the young animal would not survive. Her companion Luke Darnell, a young tracker with a sharp eye for signs, led the way, scanning the ground for tracks. "We're getting close," Luke muttered, kneeling to inspect a fresh paw print barely visible in the fading light. Ellie nodded, her heart quickening. "I don't like how quiet it's been. If we don't find it soon—" Her words were interrupted by a faint, desperate cry. It was a soft whimper, almost lost in the breeze, but Ellie's trained ears caught it immediately. She gestured for Luke to follow her, and they moved quickly through the underbrush, dodging branches and rocks. The cry came again, this time louder, filled with distress. They pushed through a thick patch of brambles, and there, in a small clearing, they found it, the bobcat cub. Small, scared and shivering, its fur matted with dirt and dried blood. The cub looked up at them, eyes wide and filled with terror as it tried to crawl away, its tiny legs weak. Luke crouched down, his voice soft and reassuring. "It's okay, little one. We're here to help." Ellie quickly moved to the cub's side, her hands gentle as she scooped it into her arms. It was light, too light, and Ellie could feel its rapid heartbeat, its body trembling. She could tell it had been on its own for far too long. "We need to get it out of here," Ellie said, her voice steady but urgent. She looked up at Luke. "But where did it come from? It's far from any known den." Luke stood, scanning the area. His eyes narrowed as he spotted something in the distance, a dark shape hidden beneath a rock outcrop, partially obscured by moss and vines. Ellie followed his gaze. "What is that?" "I don't know," Luke replied, stepping forward. "But I think we might have found where it came from." As they approached the dark shape, Ellie's pulse quickened. She hadn't expected this. A hidden cave concealed deep within the ridge. It had all the markings of something ancient, forgotten by time. She turned to Luke, her voice barely above a whisper. "Should we check inside?" Luke hesitated, his eyes flicking between Ellie and the entrance to the cave. "We have to. This could explain everything." And so, with the bobcat cub safely nestled in Ellie's arms, they stepped toward the cave, unaware of the secrets it was about to reveal. Secrets that would change everything. The air inside the cave was cool and damp, the scent of earth and stone thick in the stillness. Ellie felt a strange unease settle in her chest as she stepped forward, the light from her flashlight flickering against the jagged walls. The bobcat cub, still weak and trembling, lay nestled in her arms, its tiny body pressing close for warmth. Ellie's heart ached as she looked down at the cub, its bright yellow eyes wide with fear, the dark fur of its face streaked with dirt. Luke, a few steps ahead, scanned the cave entrance. The stone walls were slick with moisture, and the faint smell of something long forgotten lingered in the cool air. He stepped lightly, as though trying not to disturb something ancient. Ellie followed closely, staying silent, her senses heightened. High in the still, dark space. "We should be careful," Ellie murmured, her voice low. "This place feels old." Luke nodded, his eyes darting to the walls, searching for something. "I don't think anyone's been here for a long time." The deeper they ventured, the more the cave seemed to close in around them. The walls narrowed, and the flashlight's beam bounced off strange formations in the stone, sharp stalactites hanging like teeth from the ceiling, and slick, wet surfaces below. Ellie's nerves tingled with the unfamiliarity of the place. There was a strange magnetic pull here, like something was waiting for them. As they rounded a bend in the cave, the space opened up into a wide chamber. The floor was covered in patches of moss, and there in the far corner, a strange glow seemed to emanate from the rock. Ellie froze, a chill running down her spine. The glow was faint, but it was unmistakable. She couldn't explain it, but something felt deeply unsettling about it. "What is that?" Ellie whispered, barely daring to speak louder. Luke didn't answer immediately. He stepped closer, his eyes narrowing. There, embedded in the stone, were markings, strange symbols etched into the walls, ancient, worn down by time, but still clear enough to make out. Ellie stepped forward, her curiosity taking over her initial unease. She gently set the cub down on a soft patch of moss beside her, and they both knelt to get a closer look. The symbols were unlike anything Ellie had seen before. They weren't just drawings or markings. They felt purposeful, like a language. They seemed to pulse with an energy she couldn't explain. There was a feeling in the air, thick, heavy, as though the cave itself was alive with secrets. Luke traced a hand over the markings, and his fingers paused on one that was different from the rest. "This one. It's a symbol of protection. I've seen something like it in old texts about mountain clans, but I never thought—" "What?" Ellie asked, her voice tight with curiosity. Luke's eyes were wide now, a sense of disbelief in his voice. "It's a protective symbol for a guardian of the wild, but it shouldn't be here." Ellie's breath caught in her throat. A protector in this forgotten cave. The pieces were starting to form in her mind, but she didn't want to believe what they were hinting at. She looked back down at the cub, still curled in the moss. It seemed so small, so fragile. Was it possible that this cub had stumbled upon something much bigger than itself, something far beyond their understanding? Suddenly Ellie's flashlight flickered again, and her beam shifted, illuminating something else in the corner, something large, covered in a sheet of moss and rock, almost completely concealed. Her heart skipped a beat as the light fell across, the form of an ancient stone altar, its surface worn by centuries of time. Luke stepped forward, his voice dropping to a hush. "What in the world—" Ellie's pulse raced as she followed Luke's gaze. The altar was carved with more of those strange symbols, and as she looked closer, she saw something else, something impossible, a skeleton, old and weathered, its form sprawled across the stone. But what caught her breath in her throat was the fact that this skeleton was not human. It was a bobcat. Ellie's hand froze over the flashlight, the beam shaking as it fell across the skeletal remains. Her breath caught in her throat and she swallowed hard, trying to steady herself. This wasn't what she expected. It couldn't be. How could a bobcat skeleton be lying here, preserved in the depths of a hidden cave, surrounded by ancient markings and symbols? It didn't make sense. Luke, still kneeling beside the altar, reached out slowly, his fingers hovering over the bones as if unsure of what he was touching. His face was pale, the realization of what they were seeing starting to dawn on him. "Ellie, this doesn't feel right." She didn't respond immediately. Her gaze remained fixed on the skeleton. It wasn't just any bobcat. It was too large, its bones too strong for an ordinary one. This wasn't just a wild animal. There was something ceremonial about the way it was laid out, something intentional about the arrangement. "We need to figure out what's going on here," Ellie said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. She stepped forward carefully, her eyes scanning the cave's surroundings. The stone altar, the markings, the bones. It was as if this place had been built to honor something, or someone. Luke stood up, his hand still hovering over the ancient skeleton. He looked at Ellie, his eyes wide. "This doesn't make sense. Why would an ancient bobcat be buried like this? And why here in this cave?" Ellie's mind raced. She had studied animal behavior, wildlife conservation and ecosystems for years, but this was something entirely different. It was a piece of history long buried, waiting to be uncovered. She could feel it deep in her bones. Whatever had happened here, whatever this bobcat had been, it was important. It was more than just a story. It was a part of something much larger. As she walked closer, she noticed something peculiar near the bobcat's ribcage. A small, curved stone had been placed carefully on the altar, its surface polished and worn by time. Ellie crouched down, reaching for it. As her fingers made contact with the stone, a faint, almost imperceptible hum seemed to ripple through the cave. She froze, feeling the energy shift. Luke took a step back, his eyes narrowing. "What did you do?" Ellie turned the stone over in her hands. "I don't know, but I think it's connected to this." Her voice was barely audible, but her words hung heavy in the air. She could feel something shifting in the cave, as if the very walls were reacting to the stone. Suddenly, a low growl echoed from the depths of the cave. Ellie froze, her heart racing as the sound reverberated through the stone walls. It wasn't the Bobcat Cub. This growl was deep, primal, and unmistakable. It was a sound that no one would mistake. A shadow moved across the cave, and then, in the flickering light of their flashlights, Ellie saw it, standing at the mouth of the cave, its eyes glowing in the darkness. It was another bobcat. Larger, older, its fur dark and thick like a cloak of shadows, and in its gaze there was something ancient, something powerful. The bobcat stepped into the light, its movements slow but deliberate. It was unlike any wild animal Ellie had ever encountered. This one seemed to belong to the cave, to the history carved into its walls. This was no ordinary predator. This was something else. The guardian. The protector. The bobcat's eyes locked with Ellie's, and in that moment everything changed. The air in the cave thickened, charged with a strange energy. Ellie's breath caught in her throat as she stared at the massive bobcat before her. It wasn't just a predator. It felt like something more. A sentinel, a spirit bound to this place. Its eyes, glowing in the dim light, held a depth that seemed to stretch beyond the physical world, as if they had seen centuries pass and were filled with knowledge from ages long forgotten. Luke took a slow step back, his body tense, eyes wide with disbelief. Ellie, this isn't just any bobcat. What is this thing? Ellie's heart pounded in her chest, her instincts warning her to be careful, to stay still. The bobcat's eyes never left hers, its gaze unblinking, as though assessing her. Its presence felt like a test, an ancient trial she wasn't sure she was prepared to face. For a long moment, neither Ellie nor Luke moved. The cub in Ellie's arms, still weak and shivering, stirred slightly, but Ellie kept her hand gently on its back, feeling the rise and fall of its tiny breaths. She had no idea what to do. This guardian, this creature, seemed to hold the fate of them all in its powerful presence. Then the bobcat took a step forward. Ellie's breath hitched. The cub in her arms stirred again, and she could feel the pulse of its tiny body, still so fragile. The bobcat's movements were deliberate, slow, as if it was measuring each step, weighing the consequences of every action. It didn't growl or snarl. Instead, it approached with a quiet majesty, as if the space between them was sacred. Ellie took a cautious step forward, her voice barely above a whisper. "We're here to help." The bobcat's eyes flickered briefly to the cub, then back to Ellie. It seemed to acknowledge the cub's presence with a faint movement of its ears, but it didn't make a sound. It wasn't attacking, it wasn't threatening them, it was waiting. "Do you want us to leave?" Ellie asked, her voice trembling slightly. "We found the cub and we're just trying to help. We didn't mean to disturb anything." Luke stood still beside her, his gaze still fixed on the massive bobcat. What if it's guarding something? What if it's protecting the cub? Ellie didn't respond, her mind racing. She wasn't sure what the bobcat wanted, but there was no mistaking the weight of its presence. It wasn't attacking them. It was observing them, testing them. The cave had revealed its secret, but what now? What was this guardian protecting? And why had the cub led them here? Suddenly, the bobcat made a low, rumbling noise, like a purr but deep and resonant, filling the cave with its vibration. It wasn't a sound of anger, but of something else, something ancient, primal. It was as if the cave itself had come alive with the force of the bobcat's call. Before either Ellie or Luke could react, the bobcat turned and, in a graceful movement, bounded toward the deeper part of the cave. It paused just a few feet from the altar, then glanced back over its shoulder as if to invite them to follow. Ellie's heart raced, but her curiosity outweighed her fear. She looked at Luke, who nodded, his face filled with both awe and hesitation. "Should we follow it?" Ellie asked, her voice low. Luke hesitated, then took a step forward. "We have to. We're already here, and that cub led us to this place for a reason." With one last glance at the bobcat, Ellie gently cradled the cub in her arms once more. The two of them followed the ancient guardian into the heart of the cave, unsure of what they would find, but certain of one thing: the secrets that lay ahead were beyond anything they could have imagined. the bobcat led them deeper, its powerful form disappearing into the shadows, the ancient markings on the walls guiding their path. The deeper they ventured into the cave, the more Ellie felt like they were stepping into a forgotten world, a realm untouched by time. The air grew colder, heavier, and the sound of their footsteps seemed muffled by the thick layers of moss and stone that covered the cave floor. The bobcat led them effortlessly, its glowing eyes cutting through the darkness like lanterns in the night, its presence almost ethereal. Ellie held the cub close, its tiny body still trembling, its warmth a small comfort against the chill that seemed to seep into her bones. Luke, a few paces behind, kept glancing around, his unease growing with every step. The symbols on the walls grew more intricate the deeper they went, patterns that seemed to come alive in the low light, swirling in unnatural designs. "What is this place?" Luke whispered, his voice barely audible, as if the very stone walls might overhear him. Ellie didn't answer immediately. She wasn't sure she had an answer, but one thing was clear: they were not just in a cave. This was more than just a shelter or a den. The place had an air of purpose to it, something sacred and ancient. It felt like a memory of the earth itself, a secret long buried. As they reached a large opening, the bobcat stopped. It turned its head, looking back at them, then bounded to the side, out of their way, and sat down. Ellie and Luke stepped into the expansive chamber before them. What they saw took their breath away. The chamber was vast, its ceiling high and vaulted like a cathedral, the walls lined with more of the strange symbols, but now they were glowing, faintly, illuminating the room in a soft greenish light. In the center of the room, an enormous stone structure stood, a relic from a time long past. It resembled a crude altar carved into the rock, with indentations and grooves that looked intentional, worn by years of neglect, but still holding a sense of reverence. And at the base of the altar was something Ellie couldn't quite process, a stone tablet half buried beneath layers of dust and stone. The tablet was large, far too large to be moved easily, its surface covered in carvings that mirrored the symbols they had seen all through the cave. But there was something different about this one. The carvings on the tablet weren't just symbols. They were images of bobcats, but not the bobcats they knew. These creatures were massive, their eyes glowing with the same intensity as the bobcat that had led them here. Ellie knelt to get a closer look, her heart pounding in her chest. The images depicted the bobcats in powerful, almost regal poses, standing guard over an ancient landscape, as if protecting something hidden deep within the earth. Luke stood behind her, his eyes wide with shock. "What is this? Some kind of ritual?" Ellie shook her head, her mind racing. "This isn't just about the bobcats, this is something older. This place, it was meant to keep something safe." She reached out and gently touched the surface of the tablet. As her fingers brushed the stone, a faint hum filled the air. The ground beneath them seemed to tremble slightly, as if the cave itself had just awakened. The bobcat, still sitting near the entrance to the chamber, let out a low, resonant growl, not of threat, but of acknowledgement. The sound echoed through the room, and Ellie felt the weight of the moment settle on her shoulders. This wasn't just about saving a lost cub, this was something bigger. Something far more ancient than she had ever imagined. The bobcat had led them here for a reason. Ellie stepped back, her thoughts swirling. This isn't just a cave. It's a sanctuary, a place of power, built long ago to protect something. And that something we've just uncovered. The bobcat, as if sensing the gravity of the moment, stood and turned toward the altar. With a final glance at Ellie and Luke, it padded toward the stone, and for the first time, Ellie saw the creature for what it truly was. Not just a wild animal, but the guardian of this sacred place. The truth was clear now. The bobcat wasn't just an animal in need, it was a keeper of secrets, and the hidden cave was its legacy. As the bobcat disappeared deeper into the shadows, Ellie felt a strange sense of closure. They had come to save one life, and in doing so had uncovered a hidden world, a world of guardians, of forgotten history, and of a wilderness more ancient and powerful than they could have ever imagined.